Good morning. This is June the 6th, and we're still reading from It Will Never Happen to Me by Claudia. It's about alcoholic children, alcoholic families, and role models the children learn who grow up in alcoholic families. And so I'm going to start from where we left off, and we're going to start today on what's called the role model placater. So we're all ready and off to running. Let's hit the ball and go. Placator. For the adult child or adult children who spend so much time taking care of other people's needs, it is important for them to understand the word selfish. They have perfected the inability to give to themselves, nor can they consider their own needs. The placator's role is always to attend to the feelings and wants of another. As an adult placators proceed in recovery, it is natural for them to feel guilty for focusing on themselves. When I decided to put myself first for a change, I feel very guilty, and I have trouble differentiating between putting myself first and being selfish. Kathleen, age 31. Remember, you are learning how to give to yourself, and that is not bad. In order to be willing to give to yourself, it is vital to look at old messages which may need to be changed. New messages may be, I don't have to take care of everyone else. I have choices about how I respond to people. My needs are important. I have feelings. I'm scared. I'm angry. It's okay to put my own well-being first. Some situations can be resolved without my being involved. Others can lend support to those who need it when I'm not willing to be available. I'm not guilty because others feel bad. This should only be the beginning of a list of new messages to the adult placating child. I suggest you find the messages which fit your situation and make a list of them. On a daily basis for a minimum of a month, read and reread these messages out loud to yourself. You will feel some of the old guilt for a while, but it will be mixed with a new sensation, that of excitement, along with a sense of aliveness. I believe in people giving themselves credit and being their own best friends, so I do not be embarrassed about stroking yourself and being important to yourself. 54-year-old Maureen said she'd spent her life trying to be everybody's good little girl. She walked a very narrow line, afraid to do anything which might cause someone's disapproval. Slowly, I have learned it is much more important for me to consider my own needs and feelings, and how important it is for me to act on them. This is the type of freedom all adult children can attain. Maureen knows the process is slow. It is not easy to give up fears and try new behaviors. but it is possible. If you are an adult child and think you fit into the placator's role, examine how you give. On a daily basis, document all the little things you do for people, itemizing each one. After you have read your list of everything from 50 to 100 items, are you tired? Of course you are tired. Where will you find the energy to give to yourself? The answer? You won't. Ask yourself if each of these placating acts was absolutely necessary. Could you have backed off a little? As you attempt to back off on giving, you need to start work on being able to receive. All true placators need to work on receiving. Ask yourself about your capacity to receive. Do you? Yes, but when you are complimented, do you change the subject when you are commented? Are you embarrassed or do you feel awkward when you receive a gift? Can you enjoy the moment? You may need to give yourself new messages regarding receiving. One, I deserve to be given a thank you. I can enjoy being the recipient of praise. I will take time to hear my praise, smile, and soak it in. For a minimum of 2 weeks, pay strict attention to receiving. Practice your own new messages. Many people attempting to make changes sometimes fear they will go to the other extreme. Remember, it's okay to enjoy yourself, but don't worry about becoming totally egocentric. If you have spent years people pleasing, you will never totally lose that tendency. Besides, when you give up some giving, you will have more energy to receive. While it may be awkward at first, in time you will experience pure enjoyment. Whichever pattern is yours, keep receiving. As you change role patterns by being more spontaneous and more willing to follow the responsible one, by making more decisions and being more assertive, the adjuster, and giving more to yourself, placator, others will be responding to the new you in a variety of ways. Remember, they also have choices about how they respond. Many will welcome the change and adjust accordingly in the relationship. Those who want to manipulate you in order to have their needs met may attempt to sabotage your efforts. Recognize that they also have some fear about the change, about how you relate to them. However, others respond, you will like yourself better as you develop the ability to give to yourself a part of the wholeness which has been denied for too long. Keep in mind that you deserve your gift to yourself. Next one is the one that's called Chapter 7, Family Violence, Physical Abuse, and Sexual Abuse. Oh, I'm going to say this is probably going to get a little more heavier. Chapter 7. In retrospect, most adult children who were raised in alcoholic homes remember the frequent arguing which took place in the home. Some remember that the arguing centered around money or the kids. Most say the arguing was about anything and everything. Both the children and the non-alcoholic parent experience a significant amount of verbal harassment, no matter whether they are right or wrong. The impressions and feelings caused by this harassment remain with those children and are carried into adulthood. In some instances, the harassment can escalate and suddenly erupt into violence and result in physical or sexual assault. While the direct correlation between alcoholism and physical and/or sexual abuse has not been clearly delineated, a strong association between these problems is consistently identified. For these reasons, it is necessary to address the issues of spouse and child battery and incest. The following sections are designed to give a brief overview of the interrelatedness between alcoholism and the physical and/or sexual abuse. These sections will explain why, when both problems exist in a family, both must be identified and treated. And there's a cartoon here that says, "Violence comes with the alcoholic. I'll smash you only time I want. I know you won't. I'm dead." That's the child. Might show that if you can see that. Very good illustration. Physical abuse. While Dad's drinking decreased, Mom became more erratic. She was playful and fun one moment and full of rage the next. She would pick up anything, whip vacuum cleaner hose, spoons, and hit and hit and hit, and would never apologize. Even when we were bleeding, somehow it was still our fault. Written by Cindy, age 34. Alcoholism and the domestic violence alike are dangerous and potentially fatal problems, not only for the victims, but for the other family members as well. Social service professionals frequently discover these two problems occurring simultaneously in many families. Yet while either the alcoholism or the violence may be addressed as a separate issue, it is very seldom that both problems are addressed and treated simultaneously. The National Council on Alcoholism estimates as many as 60% of the alcoholic families now in treatment have experienced domestic violence. My own research indicates 66% of children raised in alcoholic families have been physically abused or have witnessed abuse of another family member. In more than 1/3 of these families, such abuse occurs on a regular basis. The non-alcoholic spouse, a child, or children may be abused. It is important to recognize, however, that the violent person is not always the alcoholic. As Cindy's experience confirms, the alcoholic also can be the victim of the violence. Thus, either the alcoholic or the non-alcoholic spouse may be the batterer. The alcoholic, the non-alcoholic spouse, and/or the children may all be the victims. To make matters worse, some children may live in a home where both parents are alcoholic and both parents are batterers. When we think of physical abuse, a picture of a badly beaten, chronically black and blue child comes to mind. In reality, battering may be much more subtle and infrequent, with barely visible results. Battering can occur in the form of punishing and shoving, grabbing, pinching, or choking. Abuse can be mental as well as verbal and physical. In many alcoholic homes, only terror exists. No bruises attesting to violence are evident. Children and spouses frequently experience intensely frightening and physically dangerous situations. When dad, in an alcoholic siege, takes the family for a 60-mile-an-hour auto ride down a mountain road at night with the headlights turned off, the effect is just as traumatic as any physical violence, yet leaves no physical scars. Emotional violence, however, frequently carries the potential for physical violence. Family members often resist identifying battering until it reaches the stage of bruises or broken bones, and until it has increased in frequency and it occurs on nearly a daily basis. When alcoholism and battering are not always related, it is helpful to examine similarities in the dynamics of both. When experienced in the home, both the batterer and the alcoholic minimize and deny their abusive behaviors. They will discount their acts and minimize the severity of their drunkenness or battering. Both have strong tendencies to blame others. Neither will accept the responsibility for their own behavior, and both exhibit Jekyll and Hyde personality changes. Children may experience an overly nice, caring parent who, after taking a few drinks, becomes a raging lion. In this case, the batterer simply erupts like a volcano for what appears to be no apparent reason. Both the alcoholic and batterer learn to rationalize their behavior, and invariably there is, in their own rationale, a good reason, excuse for the drinking or for the violent behavior. Episodic violence and drinking occur more and more infrequently as these unhealthy lifestyles progress. Invariably, for the alcoholic and the batterer, the drinking and the violence begin to cause more trauma and more problems in almost all areas of family and personal life. The alcoholic and the batterer increasingly feel more guilty and more remorseful. They frequently attempt to regain control. They make promises and create false hopes, and the cycle continues indefinitely unless the alcoholic and batterer are treated. Both spouses and children of alcoholics and batterers tend to minimize the impact of the drinking and violence on the family. This is the family's denial process. Family members accept the blame because they believe that they had been better in their roles, a better wife or a better child. A batterer, alcoholic, would have no reason to get so upset, fly into rages and drink. The denial process of not feeling, not trusting, and not talking permeate the family. Alcoholism, when occupied with violence, doubles the need for denial and creates an even greater sense of helplessness in the lives of family members. When children don't show obvious signs of being emotionally affected by violence, it is important to recognize that it is probably due to denial. Children in battered families will develop an almost identical denial process as the children in alcoholic homes, and in both situations. They practice denial to a greater extent. Role patterns in the violent home are often similar to those seen in alcoholic homes, only with an even greater intensity due to the dual problem. Remember, the goal of family members in attempting to live through these problems is the same: minimize the conflict, adjust, placate, act out, drop out, do anything, but be sure to survive. Consequences for children. Research relating to the domestic violence shows that witnessing violence may be just as detrimental to the emotional and psychological development of a child as if the child were actually being abused. Just as children who are abused tend to be abusers themselves in adulthood, children who witness assault on parents or siblings also tend to be abusers and or abused victims in adulthood. Many children of alcoholics become alcoholics and or marry alcoholics. Many children of batterers become batterers and or marry batterers. Many children of both do both. When Dad drank, someone got beat. We hated to see him get started, but the quarreling was awful loud. My mom was hurt a lot. How did he get started on me? Simple. I defended my mom, and he wanted to know who did something. Rather than see my younger brother or sister get it, I did it. No matter what it was, he usually used a wooden hanger or margarine belt on us. I still look out for my brothers and sisters and my mom. I wouldn't lift a finger to help my dad. I refused to go to his funeral or send flowers. I am the same with my own kids. Take care of them, protect them from my ex-husband, who somehow has managed to develop a dependency on prescription drugs, always has a beer in his hand, and likes to hit. Sharon, age 37. Treatment. For those of you who are victims of violence or parents of victims, your foremost concern should be to seek and or provide protection for yourself and for your family. In every state, services are available to help both adult and child victims. Crisis hotlines exist in most communities and can refer you to proper resources. Victims may need to call the local rape or battering hotline or contact a shelter to learn about specific resources for women. If an appropriate hotline is not available to you, the police often have their own hotline which address such problems. Hospitals, emergency rooms, state and county social service agencies, plus local sheriff and police departments should be able to make a referral. Many communities have shelters for battered women. Shelters provide a temporary, safe environment for women and children. They often offer confidential support, advocacy groups, and individual counseling and assistance with housing. Child care and financial needs. These shelters are sanctuaries where women can regain a degree of self-esteem and confidence and begin to seek resources and help for themselves and their families. As stated earlier, drinking is often a problem for the batterer, or they're battered, and must be addressed in order to effectively deal with the violence. Battering combined with alcoholism creates a most aggravated, and dangerous situation. Sometimes a temporary marital separation is necessary for the family's protection until the drinker becomes sober. Families may find help in shelters. The alcoholic person can find help in halfway houses or social and medical inpatient programs. See Chapter 8 regarding resources for the alcoholic. If separation is impossible, it is important for the victim to learn to detect signs of impending violence and physically remove herself or other possible victims from the home until it's safe to return. Sometimes victims purposely ignore the signs of imminent violence, hoping it will not happen again, thus missing their only opportunity to protect themselves from the violence. The same is true for the batterers. They themselves can certainly leave the presence if they perceive their own danger sign. It is wise to be prepared for potential violence. It helps to have a plan outlining where the family can go for protection at any time of day or night. If you are the victim, it may seem strange for you to think in terms of preparing for possible violence, but the time to prepare is when you are not upset, can think clearly, and are capable of organizing reasonable protective measures. I suggest you make a list of neighbors, friends, relatives, and shelters, which include phone numbers and names. Explain to people that they may be needed for transportation or as a refuge, and there may not be much time for advance warning. Plan ahead and pack a suitcase for such emergencies. Abusive incidences may be episodic, and months may pass between incidences. Be prepared nonetheless. If you feel you can take the risk, let the batterer know you will leave the house when you think physical abuse is a possibility. Indicate that you will return when you believe it is safe to do so. You and the batterer, alcoholic, should discuss this when you are both sober and in a calm mood. Be prepared to tell the batterer you are taking this action for your own protection and for the protection of your family. Let the batterer know that when he or she becomes willing to seek help via AA or treatment program, therapy, etc., you are no longer in fear of violence. You will not be forced to seek refuge. I do not suggest warning the batterer of any self-protective plans if you suspect that the response will be a violent one. If you live in a home where the battering is always precipitated by drinking, you must always approach the alcoholic when he is sober. You will have to be your own best judge as to whether to discuss your plans, but you must protect yourself and your family at all costs. Sexual violence. I am apprehensive talking about this problem because I'm afraid others might find out. I was 7 when my dad began to touch me and make me touch and kiss him. He did a lot of things to me. It hurt. I was 18 before it stopped. And that's because I left home then. I never told anyone. I'm not only beginning to accept my past and present family situations, I withdraw from people when afraid because they become my feelings, known my feelings and might hurt me. I don't visit my father and family. I just can't explain it to others. I feel guilty for never going home. I've always felt guilty. 25 million children under the age of 11 in homes where they are sexually abused, most often by fathers or stepfathers. Incest occurs in many homes and in all social economic classes. It can be defined as inappropriate sexual behavior, usually perpetuated by an adult family member with a minor child, brought about by coercion, deception, or psychological manipulation. It includes inappropriate touching, fondling, oral sex, and/or intercourse. While some victims of incest are infants and others are in their late teens, most victims are initially approached between the ages of 5 through 8, with the incestuous activity usually continuing for a minimum of 3 years. While research concerning incest and its relationship to alcoholic abuse is limited and varies in its conclusions, a number of studies document that over 50% of known incest victims lived in homes where alcoholic abuse was a major problem. In addition, many private practitioners report 60 to 80% of the alcoholic women they treat were once incest victims. My own research indicates 26% of the children in alcoholic homes have been incest victims. The highest incidence of incest occurs between adult fathers and young daughters, or between stepfathers and daughters. Other types of incest, mother to son, father to son, mother to daughter, or extended family members to children and siblings, incest do occur, but on a considerably smaller scale. For this reason, my remarks will primarily concern the father-daughter relationship. Consequences for children. It is very important that incest be recognized as a reality within alcoholic families. While it is often difficult to determine the extent of the relationship between alcoholic abuse and incest, it is vital to address both issues for the sake and well-being of each family member and the generations of the family yet to come. The effects of alcoholism coupled with incest on a young child causes serious emotional problems, both in childhood and in adulthood. Experiencing a combination of these two unhealthy lifestyles can be doubly traumatic for children. Many of the same unwritten rules apply equally to incest and alcoholism in the family. The reason children don't talk about incest are the same reasons children don't talk about alcoholism. The onset, so many times, is very gradual, and children may not even recognize what is happening until the behavior has been repeated for some time. By then, children have often developed guilt feelings. The victims don't talk because of fear that they will not be believed. She, mom, wouldn't have believed me, or she wouldn't have done anything about it anyway. That might have hurt more, and that would kill me. One woman responded, another woman revealed, I do remember being really scared, like I should be doing this. But he was my father. You listen to your father. I did it because he wanted me to do it. It was expected of me. You don't argue in my family. No one has rights in my family until you are out of the house and self-supporting. Children are naturally inexperienced and vulnerable. They have no frame of reference in which they can make judgments and tend to believe anything they are told. Their own sense of confusion makes them quick to accept blame for any situation. They naturally feel powerless in dealing with grown-ups, see themselves as unable to protect themselves, and do not perceive themselves as having available resources to protect them. One victim explained her situation this way. I didn't tell anybody about it. It was about 8 when it started. I had a vague idea it was something bad, but I didn't know what sex was. I only knew the way he acted was something I didn't want to be a part of. I wouldn't try to avoid getting into those situations. I would come home from school late, hoping mom would get home first. I made up excuses not to go places alone with him. But once it happened and once it began, I just sort of passively sat there. I wouldn't talk to him. And when he let me go, I would get out of there as quickly as possible. I never told anyone what he was doing. Oftentimes, when he came into my bedroom, I thought if I pretended I was asleep, he would go away. And I really didn't want to acknowledge that it was happening. Not trusting one's own feelings is experienced at an early age in an alcoholic family. The feeling is exaggerated when alcoholism is coupled with incest. Often, if the daughter in an incest relationship challenges the appropriateness of her father's sexual activity, he deceives her by saying her judgment is wrong and his behavior is acceptable. He will often attempt to make his daughter feel guilty and may possibly threaten her. She begins to believe her own perceptions are faulty, so will acquiesce to her father's demands. The youngster becomes intimidated and readily assumes the guilt and responsibility for her own bad feelings. She has learned extremely well how to discount her own perceptions and has developed a sense of powerlessness. The physical act of being victimized, together with improper role modeling and nurturing, accompanied by feelings of fear, guilt, and anger, lead to severe depression and or delinquent behaviors among young women. These victims carry emotional and psychological scars into adulthood. Many of these adult children who are sexually victimized marry men who in turn victimize their own children. Confusion about trust and sexuality combined with role patterns and the dynamics of not talking, not trusting, and not feeling often cause victims to repeat these psychological dynamics in adulthood. While many children in alcoholic homes do not experience different sexual violence, Many may nonetheless relate to the fear of possible sexual abuse. Others may feel an unexplainable shame about their own sexuality. A 26-year-old daughter of an alcoholic father expressed her adolescent fears to me, even though she had never been sexually violated. She feared the possibility so much that she regularly sneaked a knife to her bedroom at night to protect herself from an anticipated attack. The victim described her confusion as a result of the increasingly changing behavior patterns evidenced by her father. He changed from a caring, fun-loving father to a blaming, harsh, verbally abusive, drunken stranger. This child became more fearful of her father's actions when, along with his alcoholic-induced behavior, he began talking about how bad it was for girls to be sexual. He began increasingly graphic in his descriptions and began accusing the women in the family of misconduct in their sexual behavior. He demonstrated growing hostility toward young girls' boyfriends. Eventually, he began visiting her room late at night to accuse her of sexual activity with boys. Her fear of possible sexual abuse by her father, coupled with the normal love a child feels for a father, led to a great sense of confusion and shame about her own sexuality. Although the father in this case did not sexually abuse the child, she carried the emotional scars of the fear and shame she felt into her adult life. It is obvious that adults who drink alcoholically are not proper role models for children, particularly during the time when healthy attitudes regarding sexuality need to be imparted to children. Drunken parents often seek cruelty or tease children inappropriately with sexual innuendos. In some alcoholic homes, children are forced to deal with the drunken nudity of a parent. In other homes, parents make an attempt at maintaining discreet sex lives. The children very often face these problems alone, in silence, confused, and feeling needless shame. Nativity, red hood drapes, his black robes back, candles settle the sanctuary. Noel, Noel, we sing. At midnight he stands before us, rolling down the words. There was no room at the inn. Raising his arms, they fold down, then close. Fruitcake, poinsettias, fudge fill our perquisites, cookies, cards, and packages for the minister and his family. His daughter's presents are not wrapped. Red tissue paper, Brussels, their shadows argue against the wall, his voice commanding, hurry up, he's naked, swelling clear vodka. Sobbing, she cries, you'll wake her. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. I will stay here in the closet until morning when they call me to open my presents. All the tags in her handwriting. And I'll just read one more section here, it looks like. Preventing sexual abuse. Be you a patient, friend, or helping professional, it is mandatory for you to help young people understand that they have the right to protect themselves. In working with children or simply in normal contact with them, explain that no one has the right to touch them in certain ways, not even someone they know and love. We adults need to provide children with the psychological strength and power they need to resist unpleasant situations. Children must be allowed to say no. They need to be free to object to behaviors which make them frightened or uncomfortable. Remember, incest often stems from an unassumed prerogative on the part of the offender that children are objects and possessions. The act of incest is protected by an unwritten conspiracy of silence. This, coupled with the child's continuing fear and shame, keeps the act hidden. Children are more likely not to be victimized when they honestly believe they are not objects, do not have to be ashamed when someone hurts them, and understand that secrets about things which make them feel bad are not to be kept. These basic messages should be communicated to all children, and children should be encouraged to protect themselves against abuse. Children who know they have a right to resist and who believe another adult will support their resistance will have a better chance of avoiding abuse by battering or insinuating parents. Children need to hear these messages in order for them to risk applying these concepts when potentially abusive situations arise. They need to trust that they can say no and have their feelings respected. We adults need to let children know we do take them seriously. We need to talk with children about being bullied or taken advantage of, not only by friends or brothers and sisters, but also by persons in authority, i.e., uncle, father, grandparent. In doing this, we can explain how having secrets often hurts people and that sometimes it is not wise to keep secrets. We need to discuss touching with children. We need to give them permission to not always be nice, but to feel a sense of choice about who they touch or who touches them. This opens up the discussion about potential sexual abuse and lets them know that should such incidences happen, they are not at fault. Then we can help them determine who should be told when such incidences occur. And I'm going to stop there. So next week, uh, we'll start with the subject called treatment, which means what can we do about this very serious and terrible problem that goes on in the world of the alcoholic. And other than that, excuse me, very serious subject, very serious problems out there, but I still enjoyed reading. I still enjoy sharing with you uh, this book because it does help one understand the necessity of being able to do something about it. So anyway, with that, I'm going to see you on Saturday. And so everybody have a great and fantastic day, and I thank you for coming.